Guys, what Kyle Massey did 4 years ago was really deplorable. Same ways of what Drake Bell did in that same year. But at this point, looking back at this show, it's really difficult to look away even if you have to accept the fact that Cory in the House will never stream on Disney+. Because while I'm not defending Kyle's actions completely, it doesn't really change the fact that this is becoming a lot more older to the point that it being normalized would still be a bad thing, but when you're so overwhelmed and exhausted that you've witnessed it so many times, you just want to move on and just not want to bother something like that ever again. It's harsh towards the victims, but at the same time, you were never against the victims to begin with if you want nothing to do with this. So, That's So in the House was something that I wanted to review for such a long time, and after reviewing Just Desserts, I was planning on reviewing that episode. But since after I released my review of Just Desserts, the allegations of Kyle Massey came out, and it changed my plans entirely by not reviewing the episode. But since I'm not in the mood for Thanksgiving when it comes to making a video out of it, sorry Freebirds and other video ideas, all the while not being in the mood to review my final iCarly special, I Started a Fan War, after reviewing the other iCarly specials, this is honestly the only opportunity I can review this episode. The president wants newer uniforms since that the old ones aren't really as good for the guests who appear in the White House. And this gave Cory an idea by calling Raven in order to handle the situation by making new uniforms, which Raven did succeed, especially when it came to her visions. And when Cory takes Raven through hallways of the White House, Raven gets a vision that someone cleaning the floors machine gets out of control, that it hits the clock bell thing that lands on the president, and just when that moment is about to happen, she saves the president, but unfortunately the cleaning machine didn't went out of control just yet. And this leads to the president thinking that Raven is the kook for attacking him. This leads to Cory helping Raven on hiding from the president, since that she is the criminal in the president's eyes due to what she caused. Honestly, thinking about this episode back then and rewatching it numerous of times, I'm honestly thankful that they managed to make a crossover of Raven appearing in this show despite only happening in one episode. There was going to be a third season of this show, but since of what ended up happening behind the scenes, honestly, the writer's strike or whatever what was happening in 2007 were mostly the least of this show's problems. To give you the short story, Kyle was planning on doing a stunt that people weren't unable to save him in time, and he got a concussion, and this leads to the show itself ending due to what ended up happening due to Kyle being physically hurt. Honestly, the fact that Kyle Massey went through a lot in That's So Raven, and in this show in particular, if there was going to be an ending, I can't imagine what the ending would have felt like if it centered around voting for the next president or keeping the current president's job as the president of the United States. But considering that people who don't see this as their anime as much as other people described it as best anime, people are going to take politics seriously to the point that someone's headcanon that once the president of the United States, mainly President Martinez, is no longer president due to the other president having the position as president after the voting has been declared towards him, Cory got arrested to the point onto why he hasn't appeared in Raven's home. If that was the case, then Victor Baxter should also be arrested due to his son causing so many shenanigans to the point that it makes me question on to the fact that Raven Baxter probably disowned Cory, but even for him, that's a little too harsh. But pushing aside politics and voting, the biggest highlight in this episode for me, especially back then, is Raven in any scene that she's in. And the fact that I've watched Cory in the House more than That's So Raven back then, I really honestly felt so satisfied seeing Raven in any scene that she's in. Granted, I do remember her less back then when it comes to watching some of her episodes, with the examples of Vision Impossible being one of my favorite episodes back then. Just seeing her being in the position where she could get arrested and Cory is preventing that from happening does happen in the real world when someone attacks a president and they face actual consequences. Like, President Martinez isn't really the best or smartest president to the point that they dumbed him down to make him less intelligent, but at the same time, when him pushing down the law when it comes to someone attacking him, he is still a likable character even back then. Like, he's just because he's stupid doesn't automatically mean that he's a terrible character, and the fact that I'm actually expressing his character more since that the last Cory in the House episode focused him the least says a lot. What really grew on me from this episode years later is the chemistry between Cory and Raven, and not noticing that Raven from the first season has almost the same height as she was in this episode says a lot. That the fact that Raven's age in this just... I honestly thought that she was 17, but in reality she's in her 20s. And I always think that Cory being small was mainly the fact that in the first season he was basically a different character compared to how he was in this show. I mean... That's the type of details that I just never understand back then when I never watched the other episodes involving That's So Raven. Mainly seasons 1, 2, and mostly 3 aside from Vision Impossible. But the bit I remembered the most from this episode is Cory being dressed up as Raven to fool the president, and even though I did watch Vision Impossible, I didn't remember the costume changes. I only remembered Raven falling multiple times and the ending of that episode. Like, with the many times that Raven was in so many disguises, the fact that we get this switcheroo of having Cory being in disguise showcases on the fact that this episode knew what it was doing and capitalizing it to full extent. And the bit of Newt falling in love with Cory due to the disguise that he has on. Honestly, it didn't last long, but considering that Newt figures out right away that he's meeting the real Raven at the end of the episode, honestly, it's odd that he has smart moments. And even though that Newt is supposed to be this show's version of Chelsea, it doesn't really change the fact that there isn't another version of Eddie in this show, with how Mina is a character of her own. And the fact that in the end of the episode, while the cast watch That's So Pushik, honestly, it didn't make sense back then, but the fact that they actually made this a lot more humorous later on showcases the magic of this show and That's So Raven. This is one of the rare occasions where an actual Disney show is a show within a Disney show, even if it's from a different country, judging of how that they really executed on making this slightly different in comparison to That's So Raven. But truth be told, if this show is still have the same qualities of That's So Raven, then I'm pretty sure that this is a rare occasion that a Disney sitcom is a sitcom within a sitcom, which is something that Nickelodeon is known for when it comes to insulting the Nickelodeon sitcoms inside of the Nickelodeon sitcoms. But putting that aside, I really feel like that the second half of the episode is the highlight when it comes to the characters coming together, while Raven is just trying to avoid getting into trouble due to what she caused. With her being exposed from her disguise, everyone else chases after her, which leads to the scene where Raven saves the president a second time since that her vision is coming true, and this convinces the president that Raven isn't a kook, and Raven tells the president that she is psychic. It is kinda sad that this doesn't go nowhere since Raven doesn't appear after this episode, but still, it really could have been a lot more better executed if this show had a third season while having one more appearance of Raven, which I do have an idea of once we continue on with this video. Even though that it is a shame that we don't get to see much of Cory in the house since it ended with its second season, I have to admit that if this episode never happened, then I wouldn't even have the knowledge of instantly thinking of doing a video out of it, despite of what Kyle Massey did 4 years ago, because thinking about it back then was a lot more difficult for me to get back into the show, especially since I used 2 clips of this as part of one of my intros and outros from 2021. I'm just saying, guys, what Kyle Massey did 4 years ago was really deplorable to the point that it's difficult to see what he would have done if he didn't got into the mess that he went through. It doesn't change the fact that this show is just too iconic to overlook. Like, the jokes that he did in this show may have not aged properly, and the jokes of people describing Cory in the courthouse or jailhouse or whatever is too on the nose. It doesn't really change the fact that I'm overlooking this show, in the same way as I don't overlook Drake and Josh of what Drake Bell did in the same year of what Kyle did. All I can think of is that this show is just too iconic, and while Eddie's actor and Kyle Massey had every right to not be part of Raven's home due to their own allegations, even though it's mainly the people preventing them from being part of the show in general, I still can't be able to overlook the performances. Like, it's just, like, at some occasions, well, you just appreciate someone else's work too much that it's just difficult to go against them for what they caused. You can't defend their actions, but at this point, you can't be able to overlook the jokes and material that they were given in the roles that they're in. Like, if you can make the argument that you can defend Janelle McCurry for what she went through to the point that most of the jokes that she did on iCarly and material has aged poorly, you can't really make the argument of what Kyle and Eddie's actor did in That's So Raven and the Cory in the House won't age poorly, because they actually enjoy the parts more than Janelle McCurry's parts from iCarly and Sam and Cat. So that's why I've been considerate on reviewing this episode whenever I get the chance. It's just that when the allegations came out, those changed. But I had to review this episode sooner or eventually, and I picked the latter of that category. This show is never going to stream on Disney Plus no matter what, and I understand that that's the reality that we have to live in. But at the same time, that doesn't automatically mean that Cory in the House was a bad show. With that being said, I really feel like that the idea of having this show being a lot more better when it comes to having a third season is the fact that it would have crossed over with Wizards of Waverly Place, The Sweet Life on Deck, and Hannah Montana. Let's be real. This may be overboard, no pun intended, but this will have been a real once-in-a-lifetime by having 4 Disney sitcoms crossovering with each other if Kyle didn't get hurt while doing Cory in the House. Granted, his character will have questioned the presence of Justin, since that he is the same actor who played Larry, but aside from that, this will have been a chance to having 4 Disney sitcoms crossovering with each other, with Raven also hanging out with Cory along with his dad, the president, along with the other characters. Even though if that part would still not be streaming on Disney Plus, it doesn't change the fact that it would have been wonderful if it did happen, if this show continued. But considering that the people who made that show probably wanted to move on from it, they've been around on Disney Channel for so many years, since before 2003, while they were working on the 4th season of That's So Raven. And I've did my research that some episodes were probably produced in either early 2002 or in 2001, but it's still worth thinking about if it's true or not. Anyway, I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10, and with one more month to wrap up this year, time to get back to doing Christmas reviews.